Good morning, everyone. This is Suzanne coming to you live from the Indiana State Library. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. This webinar is being recorded. If you have any sound issues, feel free to visit the sound pod underneath your chat pod on the left side of your screen to troubleshoot that. If you can't get your sound issue figured out, we are recording this webinar, and so we'll send it out to everyone who registered and to everyone who's attending today, so you won't miss any content. If there does happen to be a global sound issue where we know that it's on our end as well, we will announce that and do something else. So I'm here today with Katie Withers and with Tiffany Carter from the Indianapolis Public Library and from the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Katie right now, and we'll go ahead and just get started.
Hello, I'm Katie Withers, and I help coordinate the Eugene and Marilyn Glick Indiana Authors Award, which is a program through the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation that's funded through the generosity of the Glick Fund, which is a fund of Central Indiana Community Foundation. We are celebrating 10 years of the award program. Woo-hoo. Yeah, so in honor of this anniversary, we've been partnering with Indiana State Library on a few different things. And one of the things is the series of webinars where we're sharing some tips and best practices that we picked up over the years, and it's been a lot of fun. So just a little information to set this up. The Indiana Authors Award main goal is to encourage Hoosiers of all ages and backgrounds to farther engage in the literary arts, and that can be through writing or reading. So we work toward those goals in a couple ways. First, cash prizes are awarded in different categories to authors with Indiana ties. Authors also get to designate a $2,500 grant to an Indiana Public Library, and I see some people listening in today that have received those grants. That's very cool. In 10 years, we've honored 46 authors and have given a total of $214,000 in cash prizes. Indiana public libraries throughout the state have received $77,500 in grant dollars. So we honor these authors at an award dinner. This year, the dinner is on October 13th, and that's also a fundraiser for us, the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation. There are still some tickets and table sponsorships available for the dinner, so if you're interested in joining us, please contact me. I think my contact info is listed on one of the slides, but if not, I'll type it into the chat box. So second, readers and writers of all ages are introduced to the honored authors at outreach events at schools and libraries. We've reached more than 3,000 people of all ages through this outreach. The centerpiece of these outreach events is Meet an Author, Be an Author, which is a day of activities for book lovers and aspiring writers of all ages. We do workshops on writing, publishing, and marketing, and those are provided by the Indiana Writers Center, and you can get LU credits for attending those, so you can check out our website at www.indianaauthorsaward.org for more info on the lineup that year. You also get the opportunity to meet with the winning authors and more than 40 local authors. It's very family-friendly. It's a fun event. So the Indiana literary scene is surprisingly diverse in so many ways, and we're committed to spotlighting that diversity with the Indiana Authors Award. But we know that if we have a panel of judges who are all old white guys, there might be some unintentional selection bias. So over the last few years, we've been very intentional about including more age diversity, racial diversity, vocational diversity on the award panel, because we want lots of different perspectives. So while it's hard to directly correlate, the diversity of winners and finalists have expanded as our panel has diversified. So we're very proud of that. This is an area we're working to grow in with the award. So I'm excited to hear what Tiffany has to say about diversity as it relates to book clubs, both for the award panel and also for me personally. I'm in a book club, and this is something we're working on as well. So that's it for me. Tiffany?
Actually, I'm going to jump back in. It's Suzanne.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. So I'm Suzanne from the Indiana State Library. I also work at the Indiana Young Readers Center, which I'm going to go ahead and put the link for that there in the chat box as well. And I just wanted to thank Katie and Tiffany so much for being here today, and to thank Katie for helping set up this series of webinars. We've done 3, and this has been really great to do as a partnership with the Indiana Center for the Book and Indianapolis Public Library Foundation. So really quickly, Indiana Center for the Book, I work with the Library of Congress, and I do programming throughout the state of Indiana to really just uplift the literary pursuits that are happening in Indiana. One of the big programs that I run is Letters About Literature, which is a letter writing contest for children, and you can learn more about that at our website. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tiffany for the content for today's webinar. Hi, Tiffany.
Hello there. Before I introduce myself, I'd like to first say a huge thank you to the Indianapolis Public Library for their support in providing funding for programming that our patrons and communities enjoy and value. Because of their efforts, generous donors provide funding that allow me to purchase books that participants get to keep and add to their own personal libraries. Generally, the books that I purchase aren't available in enough quantity for everyone to read as a whole, so that's very helpful. And it also allows participants to explore non-traditional authors that might not be as well known, particularly authors of color, and then also we get into some well-known classics as well. So a little about me. I'm Tiffany Carter, and you could not have convinced me as a teenager that I would grow up to be a librarian. I'm a Cincinnati native, and my second job ever was a page position at the former Roseline branch at the Cincinnati Public Library, and I actually lived behind that branch, so I was a library kid, truly. I moved to Indianapolis in 2013, and it's been a journey. I've done a lot, and it has been exhausting and enjoyable and exciting and all those things. Particularly when I started at the Indianapolis Public Library. As you can see, I was a library assistant, a computer lab assistant, but then things started to change when I became a traveling librarian. And it was at that point I worked at a different library almost every day or every other day.
Wow.
So I got to participate in a lot of different programming, but also a lot of different book club sessions.
For those of us that are joining from outside of the state, can you let everybody know how many branches the Indianapolis Public Library system has?
We have about 24 different branches.
24 branches.
So I've worked at 22.
Wow, that's great.
So, and I've just seen a lot of different tips, tricks, tactics, discussions, good, bad, and it's very interesting how people choose to discuss books and what books they choose to discuss. But I also noticed that a lot of it was the same format.
Mm-hmm.
And so it encouraged me to try to think of different ways to engage people in literature. And sometimes you have to sneak that in literature into other types of programming as well. So just to let you know, the plan for today, not necessarily in this order, includes facilitator do's and don'ts, my personal 4 book club commandments, how to break the rules, retention, and a little more. As far as facilitator goes, while there isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to lead a book club, there are a few key tips and tricks to follow to maintain order and, most importantly, respect amongst the group. Also, as far as the commandments, these are simply rules I keep in the back of my mind as I try to create positive, productive, and enjoyable book club experiences. As far as breaking the rules, that's not always a bad thing. Now more than ever is the time to find new ways to incorporate literature into public programming, and that starts with breaking conventional book club rules. While there is nothing wrong with traditional methods, I'll share a few ways myself and others have given creative ideas a shot. And as far as retention, we can talk about that a little, but do numbers really matter? I mean, because I've had book clubs where there have been 20 people and then there have been 2.
Yeah.
And they have been equally enlightening and impactful.
I love to hear you say that.
So.
Do numbers really matter? Because what's the goal?
Right.
You know?
Right. And it depends. I mean,
Yeah.
you might have a plan, a service plan, you might have a grant. So there are different things that dictate that, but that's something to talk about. But first, if you're first starting out, let me start with saying, when I first started doing book clubs professionally as a librarian, I remember taking over a long-standing group. They had been together for many years. They were well established. They were all very close, and I was scared to death. I was extremely nervous because I didn't know what their expectations were. And the rule number 1 is to ask them, what do they expect of you as a facilitator? One of their requests of me was to diversify the book selections. And Honestly, if I recall correctly, I was directly asked to pick books that provided insight into the lives of people of color. I, ch- um, I chose to do this with both fiction and nonfiction titles. And there's a way that you can discuss fiction um, in a more realistic manner. Not only was I not offended by this request, I was excited because I knew we would all learn from each other as we explored different content that they were unaccustomed to reading. Luckily, it gave me the freedom, they gave me the freedom to manage the book club in my own way, and it worked out really fine. I mean, and I'll explain that later, of course. But on the flip side, I support a national book club organization called Go On Girl that specifically focuses on African American authored work.
Can you say what the name of that was again?
Go On Girl, and it's goongirl.org.
Got it.
And because I personally like to read nonfiction, this group helped me to explore different fiction titles and genres. But if you're first starting out, there's a helpful LibGuide on the ALA website, and I would suggest you immerse yourself there. When you access it, you'll find organizational links, articles, and even a quick start guide. And that was actually last updated in August 2017, so it's very relevant.
And I did put the link there in the chat box for everyone for the ALA book discussion LibGuide.
And as far as the LibGuide, while I have my own do's and don'ts, I thought that they had a few notable do's and don'ts as well. And that includes don't read your favorites, because some people take that personally if you don't like their favorite book.
Right.
So you have to be careful with that. Yeah. Do mix genres. It was very important to me to try to do fiction, nonfiction every other month. That way, it just adds to it. Explore different themes. You can do authors, travel journals, childhood memoirs, books, food. So that's a good suggestion. Cookbooks.
Cookbooks. I never would think to do a cookbook.
Oh, yeah, I'll talk about that
Okay,
too.
good.
Yeah, is it our East 38th Street branch? They have a cookbook club.
They have a cookbook club. And there's a couple different ways you can do cookbook clubs. Nice. Big warning, do not choose books for the entire year. I made that rookie mistake, and you never know what issues you'll run into, particularly if a book becomes a film. Then that book is not going to be available probably at the time that you need it. Over time, books are deleted or damaged, or for whatever reason, you need to remain flexible. So have a list option for the year, but not necessarily a dictated monthly list. And also, choose 2 or 3 titles at a time. Sometimes you might have a session where people discuss more than one title, but they're related. Or you just want to do a general book talk about a theme. But give yourself that freedom to not be pigeonholed into just one book.
I think that's so smart. I think that I know that your audience is primarily adults. Is that right?
Primarily.
Okay, but
90%.
I feel like all these tips are really good for even like a teen book club where they don't really want to be pigeonholed. And so if you can give them the option, like we've got, these books on this theme, everybody read one, and then you're still going to have a really dynamic discussion, maybe even more so.
Exactly. Any questions so far?
We did have a comment. Someone said that they read Kindred by Octavia Butler for their last speculative fiction book.
Oh.
So that's cool.
I've not read that book yet. It is on my very long to-read list.
Okay.
To read or not to read. So this is just a quick Pew Institute article that gives us a few facts and figures to keep in mind as we plan and plot creative ways to increase book club membership and involvement. The article states that about 24% of U.S. adults self-report that they have not read a book in a year. That's pretty significant. I'm not going to get into the details of the various demographics because I'm trying to just focus on high-level experiences in this presentation. But my takeaway is that book clubs and on a larger scale, even public libraries, really can't afford to be business as usual. We have to find different ways to pull people in, and that even includes us getting out there.
Yes.
It's important we make ourselves aware of these trends and find inventive ways to engage reluctant readers. So. So I don't know if anybody has ever experienced that book club that just they all have that singular opinion. As a facilitator, we have to be mindful of that. So that's just one of my funny little
That's fun.
Pinterest finds.
Yeah.
So as far as facilitator do's and don'ts, let me go back for a minute. As the leader or facilitator of the group, you have a responsibility to constantly assess and manage the group's climate. They're there to enjoy, we're there to monitor. That is my approach. By that I mean being hyper aware of any microaggressions happening during discussions, making sure the agreed upon expectations are being met, and simple idea check-ins with members to see if they want to contribute in more substantial ways. Because over time, you'll find when people become more comfortable, they might want to lead the discussion, or they might have other ideas. And so it's important to kind of tap the resources of the members involved. But above all, it is imperative that respect is maintained and the circle remains open to all. And when I say the circle remains open, I mean that the door is open to the public, that anybody feels that they can join at any given time.
Tiffany, if you were in a book club experience and you noticed somebody was making some comments that were maybe biased or that were microaggressions happening, how do you as a facilitator recommend handling that?
There are a number of ways. I can think of an exact example where I've actually had to talk to someone afterwards. Just to let them know that not only were they being dominating, but they were dictating the opinions of others. And it was a very easy discussion because she just wasn't aware.
Right.
And she didn't want to make people feel that way. But it was my responsibility to notice the discomfort in the room and to address it immediately so that it didn't happen again, because what I didn't want to happen is that the other members started to fall off. So generally, people will be forgiving once, but if they come back and experience it again, you might lose them for good.
I think that's a good kind of rule of thumb. Keep that in mind.
So facilitator do's and don'ts. These, I've mentioned the ones from the ALA guide, but for me, number one do is keep the circle open for others to join. By this, I mean that all should be welcome to participate. This, of course, applies to branch-operated book clubs because there are some private book clubs that have actual membership parameters that they need to adhere to. I've seen instances where book clubs can become so close when prospective members try to take interest, they are left feeling isolated as if they don't belong.
Right.
So just make sure you're extra welcoming when new people try to put their foot in the door.
And is that a kind of culture that you have to almost foster within your group so that they know it's not their book club, it's everyone's book club?
You do, especially when they've been together for many years.
For a long time, yeah.
And I've seen where it just doesn't work. I mean, sometimes groups can become so cohesive, you just might have to start another session.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Strive to be unbiased. It's easy to get wrapped up in our personal opinions during discussions. And while I agree that genuine thoughts should be exchanged, as the facilitator, it is our job to guide the discussion and not dictate it. Great books make this difficult.
Right.
But this is why being prepared is important, because you know when and where to check yourself when you're talking about certain subject matters, certain people, certain themes. We discussed at once in this political climate, we were discussing first ladies. So that's a place where topics or the discussion can get heated. But as the facilitator, you keep it moving and you keep it moving for the group. Behave as a member, not a teacher.
Wow.
And I've been a teacher. So, and there's a difference in how you go about facilitating book clubs in your classroom. I say this because it's easy to get so wrapped up in the prep and the details that you can unintentionally organize the discussions as an actual course. This isn't a lesson. There's no syllabus to pass out. And so you have to be mindful of that. Like remove the rigid aspect of any of your planning. And one thing that isn't listed here is to introduce the author. Many times we discuss a book and you never see the author's face. You never get to know anything about them. So I like to put their picture on a discussion sheet or bring their picture up on a projector. I'd like to hear their voice. If there's an interview out there that we can hear them talking, their background, what made them write this book. I mean, explore the author as much as you explore their book.
I'm going to jump in and say that teachingbooks.net is a resource that we have at the State Library, at the Indiana State Library, through our Inspire databases, and they have that type of information about the author for many, many children's books, including a lot of interviews with the authors. Sometimes they have the authors pronouncing their names, and they do primarily just work with children's and teens books. But I think that's a great point to try to highlight the author, because that's why we have the book,
And we don't always get to see them face to face or through Skype, but generally just getting to know them through social media or whatever, through the internet somehow, is helpful.
Help you understand the book better too.
Okay, a few don'ts. Do not select books without input from others. This happens all of the time. And that's like the number one do not rule. I mean, it's a book club, it's a shared reading experience. So the list should be shared as well. Absolutely involve members in the selection choices. In fact, take some due diligence to give them great options. So it's not necessarily their job to explore titles, but they definitely can consider them. This is where our expertise as librarians and access comes into play. So I wouldn't say don't overwhelm your group with options, but certainly over time, just build an inventory to share. In the past, I have actually printed the listing provided on the Indiana Humanities Novel Conversation site, and I will just hand out that list for two reasons. One, it's good for me to know what they've already read. So they'll go through, because oftentimes I'll use those book club kits from the Indiana Humanities Novel Conversations. So they'll mark off what they have read, and then check off what they might be interested in. And I'll show you later how I create these summary sheets of some of those considerations. Do not dominate the conversation, as I've said before. The book club sessions I enjoy the very least is where one or two, but especially one person does most, if not all, of the talking. So you have to be careful in how you address that. I mean, people are passionate about different things in different ways, but there's always a dominator in the conversation. And you just have to encourage others to speak up. Not silence them, but encourage the others to speak up as well. Also, be careful not to limit options to only print. This is something that's often forgotten about. And this step can be easily overlooked. We all have different lifestyles, attention spans, preferences. But it quickly occurred to me that by choosing books only available in print, I was excluding others who may not have time for anything else but audiobooks. And I found myself in that position as well. Or some people just only want to read on their Kindle. So I tried my best to find books that were agreed upon that came in print, ebook, and audiobook.
That's good. We do have one question on the chat. Melissa says, are there any tips on what to do if you give your group a list of titles and they still won't choose anything? She says, I've given them big lists and small lists and they still won't choose. So she does have a few staff members help her choose, which is still getting input from others. Do you think?
But why aren't they choosing?
Why aren't they choosing, Melissa?
Is it analysis paralysis where they have too many choices?
I mean, because that's something to explore. Maybe, I don't know. I'd be interested to know if she asks them why they aren't choosing a book. I've had groups where they just say, I don't care. So are they reading the books you are choosing? That's a difference. Are they new to book clubs? I mean, there are so many different factors as to why that could happen.
Okay, but that's a good tip to put it back on them and say, all right, guys, I've given you a lot. Why aren't you picking anything?
I've also shown up to discussions with like a cart full of options and say, hey, we're just going to pick something today. And if you don't all want to read the same book, we'll just have a book talk the next time.
So she says she doesn't know why they won't choose. She says, I've asked. They tell me that they'll read what's available. So it sounds like they
just want to be led.
They just want to be led,
and that's okay. As long as they're participating in the discussions, just keep pushing them until.
Yeah, and Sharon says she has this problem too. They just seem really content to let her pick, even if she does ask.
Well, one thing I'll say that will help with this is start adding other aspects to the discussion. Like I said, I started adding different video clips. And I'm going to talk about that more later.
Okay.
Music, video clips, resources, like your database resources, articles. I mean, there are so many other things that go along with a book discussion outside of the actual book.
Thank you.
My last don't that's not on the slide is be sure not to shame opinions. It's easy to do. You know, I'll hear people say, oh, that's dumb.
Oh.
I'm like, no, you can't do that. And watch for condescending responses as well. So you just have to monitor that within yourself and as you are witnessing the discussion. Because if you think about it, while discussing the books, we are essentially sharing ourselves, our perspectives, our values, our beliefs. So we just have to be mindful of how we respond to each other in those discussions.
I'm going to jump in one more time, and then I'm going to try to let you get through some content. But Rachel says she gives her high school students a list of the taglines of the books with nothing else to help them choose.
Ooh,
I think that's an interesting
cool.
idea, because you could also maybe instead of giving them a list of titles, give them a list of first lines, and maybe that will help them decide, like, oh, well, that doesn't sound interesting, but this does.
Or catchy quotes.
Catchy quotes from them, yeah. So maybe that's another way to do it.
Okay, so as far as the 4 book club commandments, number 1, include fun. This is not a class. That is my public service announcement. Book clubs are not classes. Know your people. Be prepared. Always provide a takeaway. I think I already showed that, didn't I?
You did. That's okay.
So know your people. Know what they do and do not want to read if you can. But you will know if you get to know them as individuals. Does anybody remember the Wendy's commercial, Where's the Beef?
Yes, of course.
Well, just think, where's the fun? Like, if there is no fun in any aspect of your book discussions, it will die. Your club will die eventually. Anything too serious is just not worth someone's time, either whether they're retired or not, coming before or after work on the weekend. Nobody wants to sign up for something they do not enjoy.
Super serious book club.
Exactly.
Every Saturday.
Yeah, no one wants
No
that.
one's
So if you have a book club bouncer, get rid of them after the webinar. Be prepared. So it's not always feasible as a facilitator specifically to read every page of every book.
I feel like you just said something major.
Right.
And actually, I went too fast. Sorry.
That's okay.
Let me go back. I apologize. I went too fast. Let me go back to knowing your people as far as reading limitations. There are some things to consider, like some people need large print.
Yes.
So you might have to use your budget to buy a few large print to accommodate some of those readers. Some writing styles are too highfalutin. I mean, some people just don't want to read those scholarly materials. Some books are too long. I remember one club wanted to read the Poisonwood Bible, and I'm like, that's like 500 plus pages. I'm not reading that. And so they decided that was too long as well. But you have to know your people to know what's best for them. You know what I mean? So especially if you're choosing books for them. But if this is a truly shared experience, these things shouldn't really happen. Also appropriate. Some people are offended by things that are too sexually suggestive, and I mean, you don't always know that when you're offering a suggestion. So I've had a couple instances where you know, gave a suggestion later to find out that it just wasn't good for them. So that was a learning experience for me. How do I help myself through those types of things? I try to go to Goodreads and see what people are saying about it because I haven't read it, and I take that feedback on like Amazon or Goodreads to gauge, you know, the content is.
Another really good one for children's books is commonsensemedia.org.
Yeah.
Have you used
I
that?
have not.
It's a great resource. It tells you like this is what's in the book. There's maybe drinking, there's heavy petting, you know, whatever happens to be in the book. But it also tells you the positives. Like this book also has a strong female character or something like that. So that's a good one. I'll put that in the chat too.
And also getting to know them is important. There was a book I really wanted to read, but it was about like end of life subject matter. And my group at the time was an older group, and I knew some of them were personally going through some things, so I was not sure if that book was appropriate. And so I just provided a summary at some point and said, hey, this is the subject matter. Are you guys okay with reading it? And it turned out to be one of our best discussions.
Well, that's great. I did have a question that I wanted to circle back to. How do you encourage, or I guess discourage or derail negative comments when you are, this was when you were talking earlier about, you know, someone who's maybe being dominating or someone that's saying, oh, that's stupid or whatever. How do you handle that?
Well, in the instance that I mentioned, I actually took notes so that I could provide specific examples.
Of what they actually said.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because when you go to talk to someone, they'll say, well, like, you know, what did I do? And I was able to tell them, you know, because she was unaware that, you know, well, this comment could have been said in a different manner, or this shouldn't have been said at all. So take notes of those types of things so that you can provide specific feedback to try to discourage that from happening again.
Thank you.
Okay, be prepared. So like I was saying, specifically as a facilitator, you don't always have time to read every word on every page of every book. And you shouldn't have to feel bad about that. But you are still responsible for being prepared for the discussion. And there are various ways to do that. But in addition to being prepared, add some different elements. Make, as you can see, you know, just adding the, like I said, the picture of the book and the author on the discussion page. I go to YouTube, and not only will we watch like author interviews, but also blogger interviews, blogger reviews of the book to see what other people's in-depth opinions are. I remember one time Danielle Steele had an interview on Good Morning America, and we watched her interview when we read one of her books, Blue, which is an awesome book. That was the one and only Danielle Steele book I've read so far, and I loved it. News reports, documentary clips, music. So when we read the Madam C.J. Walker memoir, I played music from that time period when they walked in the door.
That's cool.
So, you know, there are different ways to make it exciting.
Do you guys have like a Facebook group or anything for any of your book clubs? I know my personal book club, we have a Facebook group, and so we're on a monthly basis of meeting, and so as the month goes along, we add those like video clips once a week or links to, you know, maybe they made a movie about it and link to the movie on Netflix or something, so that people are building excitement throughout the month before they meet and talk about the book.
So for Go On Girl, yes, there's an Instagram page. I believe there's a Facebook page where you get to see other groups and how they discussed it. I don't do that for the NDPL book club.
You have to find everyone on Facebook.
Yeah. But as far as the Go On Girl, I think it's really awesome. You get to see the pictures and what they did and how they chose to discuss it. And
well, and we have so many diverse libraries joining us today. It's quite possible that a smaller library that might work really well to join a Facebook
or a
group.
high school. It sounded like there were a couple people representing teens.
Exactly. And this is just simply a picture of an example of organized choices. You'll be surprised how much people appreciate that. All of the books were ready to grab. Book pages were available to take. I don't know if anybody hands out book pages, but my people love to receive those and they look for them every month. It's simple, it's sweet. if anything is going to be consistent, it should be that type of organization. Just the wrong button. Always provide a takeaway.
Those are fancy.
They are very fancy. And no, your takeaways don't have to be this extravagant every time. In fact, they should not be. But sometimes it's just good to experience. This particularly was provided by these two sisters in my group that are just really creative and really fabulously over the top. And they were nice mementos. But like I said, it could be an article about the book, an article about the author, a book page, something, but always strive to give your members something to take with them. Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. So like I said, the most consistent thing I do is always give out those discussion sheets, and they look forward to those.
Right.
Because then they go home and think about them a little more, and sometimes the next month they'll say, hey, I went and thought about this question, and we'll just talk about the last book just for a little bit in the beginning. Breaking the rules. It's simple. Don't just think outside of the box. You have to get rid of the box.
No box.
In this picture in particular, this summer, author Tamara Winfrey Harris joined us at our branch. And so what I did was had a book talk and incorporated that into a paint and sip.
Oh, cool.
And there were women of all ages. The book title is The Sisters Are All Right, and it talks about just the experiences of Black women and stereotypes, and a local organization, Art with a Heart, that traditionally does children's programming. Caitlin, who's awesome, agreed to do her first adult session. Wow. And the theme for the painting was like Black Girl Magic or something like that. But it was really fun. So not only did we get to meet the author, we talked while painting. It was just
that sounds so beautiful.
A huge,
I'm jealous.
a huge experiment. It was literally like a 3-4 hour program. I think we were together for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
But it would be, because I think the painting ended up taking much longer. But it was just wonderful. And, you can't always have this type of expensive programming, but it was a very unique experience. There were women there of all ages. There were young girls. I promised the little girl at the bottom, we didn't kidnap her. She just did not like her picture. But it was just fun. And I look forward to doing that hopefully one more time this year and maybe at least once a year. But
That's
the
cool.
author, she loved that experience as well. As far as other examples, Cleveland Public Library, their outreach coordinator goes to high schools and does directed readings. So like right now they're reading The Hate U Give, and they do a few chapters at a time.
Cool.
So I thought that was pretty unique, like not to just swallow the content up all at once. And so she bounces around. Chicago Public Library has a cookbook club. Now I've seen this done in different ways where they'll bring in a chef and they'll cook something from the cookbook and taste it. I've heard of the members cooking a dish from the cookbook and bringing it in to share. So any other unique book club experiences out there?
We have a lot of people chatting right now about the book Station 11. There was a group that when they have their meeting, they're going to pair it up with a podcast episode about preparing for the apocalypse. Ooh. So that's kind of interesting. So they might listen to that podcast and then have that.
I like that.
Sort of help launch their discussion. And then we also did have a question about attracting and retaining men and boys in book discussions. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tiffany?
No.
She kind of just deflated.
Oh, because it's so difficult. I mean, that is actually my dream project. Because I have not seen it done on a grand scale.
Right.
Or consistently. And so I have been talking to men saying, why aren't you a part of a book club? And they're like, because that's for women. So it's like, how do you rid that conditioning and to show men that it can be enjoyable to talk about a shared reading? I don't know, but that is something that is a personal passion project.
So now we have multiple attendees typing.
That I'd like to figure out, particularly with men and boys together.
I've heard of one-offs where maybe there's a book that has to do with being a veteran or something like that, and if you can pitch it to the right group, an existing group, you might be able to get folks in that group to come and participate. So
now, a church I attend, they do a book club for men. I don't know the success of that. I've not talked to anyone that coordinates that, but I've thought about like fraternities or the organization like we just mentioned before, 100 Men. Like if they're a way to pull in established groups and support them.
Yes.
That way.
To me, that's like
because they have the population.
Right. That's like low-hanging fruit. That's like the first step is to find a group that's already meeting that has men and get them to do your book discussion. So that's a way to try to get started anyway.
Is that it for that?
Yeah.
So another breaking the rules with my group, we like to do an event before or after the discussion. So like in particular in this picture, we went to a jazz concert at the Arts Garden, and then we discussed An American Marriage by Tayari Jones afterward, which is an awesome book. But we always find unique things to do. I'm trying to think of what else, like movies.
Can you talk about doing a book discussion without a book?
Oh, yes, I will.
Okay, good. We're getting there.
Yes. Well, without a book, kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of. Okay.
One other way to break the rule is to share an author. So I have to tell you, we're running out of time, but basically this author, I found her, I loved her book. I literally used the database USA to, what is it called? Reference USA. I cold called her and said, I love your book. Will you please like go to the libraries and talk about it? And she did.
That's great.
And she bounced around to different branches. And we shared and passed around the books. And matter of fact, some people loved her so much they went to multiple discussions. Cool. So if you're doing something that you think is awesome, share it with other locations, even outside of your system, if you have an author that's interested in traveling. Another thing we've done at NDPL is a staff development book club, where we discuss everyday bias, which was a very transformative experience for those involved. A lot of transparency. It was not an easy discussion. We had 2 sessions, and it was actually facilitated by one of our board members.
Wow.
Terry Jett from Butler University. Dr. Terry Jett from Butler University. So it was a really great experience. People really want to do it again, but it takes a lot of time to get staff together during the day.
Sure.
It's kind of hard, but it was well worth it. And Cheryl Wright and others really supported this endeavor, and it was a good experience. You see, we have smiles on our faces, and it was so successful. I ended up going to ALA to talk about
that's
how I organized it and
that's great.
How that was. And go
ahead. You go ahead.
And lastly, a book talk. So there's an event that travels around the country called Girls Who Brunch Tour, and so I took the Jacqueline Woodson Brown Girl Dreaming book and some little crowns, and we had a book talk, and I read some excerpts, and then we did some group activities around that book. So you can still discuss a book without reading every page of it, for sure.
Yeah. We have so many comments happening in the chat, and I feel like this has been such a great presentation so far.
But somebody asked about...
Yes. Go ahead.
So watch instead of read. Like, watch things that are book theme related. So these are like, I've seen 2 out of 3 of these. One is a documentary at the bottom about these women who've been in a book club together for like 50 years. Oh my gosh. It's actually on Hoopla, and it's really cool. And book club movie just came out. That might be a fun thing to watch. This one on the right, Ladies Book Club, is a play I just found on the Urban Movie Channel. website, and so I plan to watch that too. But that could be fun, just to watch something. Take trips. I know here we didn't get to do it, but Madam C.J. Walker, we really wanted to visit as a part of our reading, but it just
I know they're under construction.
yeah,
now.
the logistics didn't work
hours
out
are-
at the time. Discuss quotes. Those are things that I've done on an aside with people who I know are not going to read entire books, but I'll just pull out different elements of a book, add a few articles, and that's a way to discuss a book. Discuss an author. Just talk about like what they write about. What are their themes? And then talk about that theme. So that's essentially a roundabout book talk. I don't know. You can be creative. And really quickly, retention. Quality versus quantity. I have not particularly been in a situation where numbers were a factor, or someone was telling me you need to make sure you have 7 or 12 people every time. So I've never had that kind of pressure. But if you kind of follow these tips, you'll have people that want to stay, that'll bring in other members. But no matter how hard you try, you will never please everybody. Like, get that out of your head in the beginning, and you'll be very happy along the way. And as long as you remember this is not a class, because I think when I first started out, I was like so organized because I was a teacher. So I was like overwhelming them with content and articles, and I just had to slow down because I was stressing myself out a little bit.
I think it's a great thing to remember that you are a part of the club. You aren't the head of the club.
Exactly. You're a member, not a teacher.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and as far as to eat or not to eat, ask them if they want to eat or not. I mean, personally, if ever I have a guest, I always bring refreshments. That's my rule. But in general, I try to have water and peppermints. People seem to just enjoy that. But like I said, this group here, we go to dinner.
That's so nice.
Lots of us. So it just depends on your group, but ask them. Don't waste that time and don't waste that money on food. If you have a Keurig, provide tea and coffee. So simple, just ask them. I think a lot of the time where we make our mistakes is we don't include the members in the prep, in the decisions that we make. And these are a few book club suggestions because based on books where there were very spirited and passionate discussions. There were many more, but I didn't want to overwhelm the slide. But in particular, I just recalled these books living on for a while after we read them, where people would come back and say, oh, I was thinking something else about that book.
And Susan Crandall is an Indiana author who wrote Whistling Past the Graveyard.
Yes, and she actually came to one of our sessions, as you can see right here in the middle. That's Susan with our book club. And these are just pictures like when we discussed the Margaret Truman First Ladies, it was at the time when Obama was still in office, so we got to watch this cool little documentary about how Michelle Obama differed from all of the previous First Ladies. We watched Malala on an interview with, I can't remember his name right now. Oh, who is that in the background? But we watched a Malala interview from an HBO television show, I can't remember. But there are all so many different things you can do to just have a good time. And that's just, at the end of the day, that's the goal.
One of the questions I wanted to try to get to, someone said she's thinking about starting a controversial book club and specifically choosing controversial books. What do you think about that?
Why?
Okay.
You know, like when you say, like, but what is the purpose? Is it to enlighten? Because that's different. I mean, you can take controversial in many different ways, but is it to enlighten? Like, is there a theme for those type of books? Are they based on politics? Are they based on race? Are they based on, like, what is the goal of that? Not just to, I wouldn't want to just have discussions that prompt offense. So, and make sure everyone's on board with that so they know why they're coming together. Because like I said, that Everyday Bias book was not an easy read.
Right.
And it was considered controversial for many, but there was a reasoning behind why I chose that book. And everybody had a shared understanding of why we were discussing it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point for really any book that you're doing. Like, why are you? Well, maybe we don't have to get real deep into it, but especially if you're picking something that is going to be a little bit more pushing the envelope for some people in your book club.
But I agree with pushing the envelope.
Yeah, sure.
Forcing people to reflect.
Right. So. But you've got the reasoning behind it. Someone says it could be called the Social Justice Book Club, and that way people are, aware of what it's about. That's a good positive
for me,
way.
I wouldn't consider social justice materials controversial. So
right.
It's
exactly. Yes.
It's all up to interpretation.
Right. Yeah.
One more last thing. I know you can't read what this says, but it's just about summary sheets. So if you're trying to recruit new people, sometimes I'll just put summary sheets in the branch so people can see these are some of the things that we might be reading this year or that we are going to read. So they might not take the time to pick up a physical book, but they can have this sheet and they take it home, they'll read it and say, that might sound interesting, and come back. Like Seabiscuit, I am shocked at how much I love that book.
Seabiscuit is so great.
It was such a good book.
It's such a heartwarming book.
Yeah, it is. And The Readers of Broken Wheel. So, a lady did come because she said she saw one of the summary sheets and she thought the book sounded interesting. She said, I would have never picked up that book. Well, thank goodness there was a summary sheet. And at the end of the day, no matter our differences, we can all connect through books. That's the beauty of literature. So that's all I have. We made it.
Thank you, Tiffany, so much. Does anyone have any other final questions for Tiffany? Katie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think the only thing I would add is just to be really clear with prospective members about what your book club, its purpose is. So, for example, my personal book club, the focus is on community. It's a group of girls getting together and we talk about the book, but a big focus of it is like we create new recipes and test them out. And it's just it's very casual, community focused. And some people, that's why they join a book club. And for other people, they want a more serious experience. So I think just letting people know what your book club is like and what the kind of goals of it are up front will really help make sure that you're getting the right members that are getting the most out of the book club.
Sorry, okay, so now on your screen is your LAU form. So that's the very top pod. You just click on the name of the file that says Diversifying Your Book Club 2018, and then the button underneath it that says Download Files will show up and you'll be able to grab that. But Tiffany's also pointing to her last slide, I believe. So we're going to try to share that last slide and then come back to here. So hang on. I'm going to go here. Try resume slideshow.
There it is.
Sorry.
Oh.
It's not on their screen. So come here. And then go ahead and we're going to try this. Do the drop down. Yep. And then share my screen. And then share, and there it is. Okay, so now you can do from current slides, maybe.
Okay, so this is not like scientific or anything at all, but these are just like regular go-tos that I use. YouTube or Vimeo for clips. Lit charts, like you have to pay for it, but there are some front-end. Lit charts basically provide summaries, and then it provides like discussion questions, all these other things. I really think that like libraries should pay for this subscription because there are a lot of book offerings out there and like really awesome summaries.
But you said it's free?
It's not free.
Oh, it's not free.
It used to be when I first
gotcha.
started using it. Okay. And then I think I used it so much, they were like, we need to charge.
Gotcha.
Goodreads, like I said, I don't have time to read every book, but even just on a reader advisory level, I go out there to read comments to try to get an idea of what people feel about it and some filler information about the content. Indiana Humanities, their novel conversation site, they have a lot of books in their inventory through their book club kits that you can use. So I often go out there and to look for titles. And then to buy books. Sometimes I just go to 8 books to just get discarded books. You don't always have to give shiny new books to members. They're just happy to receive books sometimes. Those
Okay,
are my
cool.
go-tos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and put the file back up so everybody can grab it. There it is. So I think we're all pretty much done with our webinar, so we're just going to wrap up here. I just want to thank Tiffany so much for coming in today, and Katie as well. This was our last webinar in our 3-webinar series that we did in partnership with the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation, so thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
It's very exciting to have the Indiana Authors Award Dinner coming up in October and meet an author, be an author, so that's really great. Okay, well, thank you.